All right. Hello, listeners. Welcome to Lament of Hope podcast. We are on a part two with Jason Arkles here. And I am super excited because for those of you who listened to part one, it was really fascinating. Jason is a sculptor. And we really got to the point where he talked a lot about his background and how he became a sculptor. And now he kind of left off in the last episode talking about how he creates a lot of religious pieces for his clients for commissions, but at the same time, he himself is an atheist. And so we kind of left off there, and he talked about how one of his religious pieces that he's created is actually one of his favorites or he's most proud of. And that really struck me, and we kind of left off, and typically I only do one episode, but I was like, let's do another one. I think there's more here. We could do a part two. So for those of you who haven't listened, please listen to part one, because this is not going to have really the context for part one, because we're going to jump right in where we left off. But Jason, I do want to ask, first of all, what's that piece you were talking about? And how did that commission come about? What is it?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. It's actually one of my favorite stories about my career. And I've got a lot of stories.
You do.
I know. Way back in the late 90s, when I was maybe a second year student, still, at the very beginning, learning sculpture, living in Florence, Italy, I noticed in the center of town, in the center of Florence, a small church. It's an Anglican church. It's, an English language church. There's a big English immigrant community here in Florence, and has been actually for centuries. And this church has a single niche above the main door. And that niche in 1996 or 1998, whenever it was empty, except for maybe a little marble cross about 2 feet tall. But it's a niche, built to accommodate a life-size figure. And I was like, wow, amazing. I wonder what sculpture will ever go into this. The church has been there for over a century. It was actually built into a pre-existing Renaissance palazzo that used to be owned by Niccolo Machiavelli. And again, it's to serve the English language community here, one of several English language communities here. And I thought, wow, it's crazy to be in the middle of Florence, Italy, and have a space, this niche built to hold sculpture, and yet there's no sculpture there. And so as a second year student, I sort of daydreamed for a while. When you're a student of sculpture, you're constantly making figure projects. The class hires a model and puts that model in a pose, and you just do your best to create a version of that. And one of the things I decided to do after that project was done, it was just a simple nude figure. I gave myself the challenge of, wow, what if I had that commission to put a statue in that niche? And it's, again, a single niche. It's the only decoration on this facade that even indicates that it's a church. And it's St. Mark's Church. So I thought, okay, it'd be a statue of St. Mark. And so I made a sort of fantasy project of like, okay, if I had to do a St. Mark, how would it go? So fast forward 9 years. And I'm talking to a friend of mine who is a fellow teacher. I'm now teaching at Charles Cecil Studio. And this teacher is moving back to the UK. And I asked her if I could talk to her landlord, because I'd like to take her flat, because she has this enormous, spacious, flat apartment. And it's cheap as chips. It's really, really inexpensive because it's really run down and, not in great shape. But that's fine, because I was looking for a place that I could use for my very first sculpture studio. And this flat, this apartment, happened to be above St. Mark's English Church. Right. So you have to imagine, this church, it's a small church, seats maybe 150 people, built into the ground floor of this Renaissance palazzo. But the church owns the entire building. And so there are several floors of apartments above it. And that's kind of what keeps the church afloat. And, it's really run down. And my friend was renting this place. And she said, well, I'd be happy to point you in the direction of the chaplain of the church. It's a very nice guy named Father Lawrence. But they're sort of kicking everybody out because they're going to do this huge years long, multi-million dollar restoration of this building. It hadn't really been updated, practically since, the Second World War. And so they're going to
Hmm.
put on a new roof and new plumbing, and they're going to redo a lot of the apartments, and it's going to be really nice. And so I was like, oh, darn. So I go home and then I go out and then I go out. Um, it's a social evening, Saturday night. I'm out at this nightclub, which a lot of the students of the school frequented. But of course, this is 10 years into my education and my teaching. I'm about 34. And of course, all my students are like 24, 22. And, um, and I'm there and it's having a good time. And I drink a little bit too much and I go home and I'm lying in bed the next morning, a little bit hungover and really just sort of like feeling sorry for myself. It's like, what am I doing? I've been, this is like, and I'm not a big partier or anything. It was like kind of a, I overdid it that night and I don't like being hungover. Who does? And I'm just thinking there, it's like I really need to do something to change my trajectory because I don't feel like I'm moving forward anymore. At this point, I'm, spending 6 months in Florence and 6 months back in the United States where I have a studio in North Carolina trying to make things happen. But I hate being away from Florence. So I'm back as much as possible. And that kind of breaks my sort of momentum and continuity of whatever I'm doing in both places. I'm like, I need to figure this out. And so I'm lying there thinking.
Can I ask? I know this, and I don't
Yeah.
mean to interject, but did you ever want to have like a family, or is that something that just never happened?
Yeah, at various times, and for various reasons, I also really didn't want to have a family. So,
Yeah.
early on, I thought I would be married by the time I was like 25. Back when I was in high school, and but it wasn't a driving force. I just assumed I would just do the thing that people do when they grow up, and but that was before I had that crazy time that led me to Florence.
Yeah.
But I did, after I started to study sculpture, I would, I know so many people who are incredibly talented and driven and ambitious and good and doing all the things right. And then they fall in love and then they get married or have a baby or both. And suddenly their priorities shift. And of course, they're all very, very happy with that shift. People always
Yeah.
will say,
Sure.
having a baby changes you. It really changes your priorities, but don't worry, it won't be a bad thing. Well, I had started at the age of 24 to live a life that I never really imagined for myself or expected, and I love it. I loved it
Hmm.
then, and I love it now, 30 years on. And I have shied away from a lot of opportunities that would have led me to change my lifestyle in a drastic way because I'm not independently wealthy. I don't come from money, and I haven't made a huge pile of money where if I suddenly had to support a family or even gradually had to support a family, I would have to rearrange my life to the point where I might not even be able to sculpt anymore. And that's a deal breaker for me. And yeah, I had some angst 10, 15 years ago. I'm missing out. I'm getting to the point where I really need to make a decision. And I made the decision. I actually even stopped dating. I haven't had a serious girlfriend for probably, I don't know, since 2017, I guess. I don't know. But and I'm in my mid-50s now, and being single in your mid-50s is fantastic, and not having kids is fantastic because you're sort of at the height of your power. You're at the height of your agency, and you're just in a place to really sort of take full advantage of your situation. And so I'm very happy with the decision I made. Not that I like
Well,
made a conscious decision and said, okay, from this day on, no more. But it's just the impulse of my adult life has led me sort of this path, and no
I was
regret.
going to say right before you jump back into the story, I do think there's there's so many stories and so many individuals who have tried to do art and have a family. And
Mhm.
it doesn't mean they can't. I've seen
No, a
people
lot
who
of people
have.
can. A lot of people
Yeah,
do. Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I do think there's respect that I have for someone who knows themselves enough to go, but my art will always be more important to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, if we join together and we're going to commit, I can't give you 100%. And
Right.
that's not really fair because when you
Exactly
come,
right. I
that's
don't
what you're
want to be a
promising to
bad
do.
father. I don't want to be a bad father. I don't want to be a bad husband. And I'd
Right.
rather be no husband at all, no father at all.
Yeah.
And sculpture for me is truly a vocation in the sort of original sense of the word. A calling. It's where we get
Yeah.
the word vocal. Um, and this is who I am. This is what I want to be. And
Well,
yeah,
you are wed to your art.
yes, yes. And a lot of people, do that, and not necessarily to art, but to their jobs or to their other vocations. Um, a priesthood, a monkhood, becoming a nun is, very similar. They say, no, I'm not going to have a family, so I can focus on what is more important to me. Same sort of thing.
So
Not that
anyway,
I,
I'm sorry. You said
yeah.
you were wanting a new trajectory, which got us on this. I was thinking
Ah, yes.
family.
Okay. So me, Sunday morning, lying in bed, pale and sweaty, feeling sorry for myself. And I start thinking about my friend Jen and her flat. And if I could only have that flat, things, I'd have my own studio, I could move things forward. And that got me thinking about that niche that I was obsessed about 9 years earlier. Right. I'm like, wait a minute. If they're going to spend all this money on this building and really sort of, new everything, redo the facade, do the roof, maybe, just maybe, they're looking for a sculptor to make a statue for that niche. And
Hmm.
so I was just in the right state of mind to just go, okay, screw it. I'm going to go. And I pick up my portfolio and I sort of stumble down the stairs and walk across the town to St. Mark's English Church. And I arrive after the service. This is Sunday morning, but Sunday, almost noon. Missed the service. And I had been to St. Mark's English Church many times before that and attended services. And I know that they have um, uh, sort of in the States, it's like, coffee and donuts after church. And of course, in
Yeah.
Italy, it's going to be a glass of wine and some espresso.
I
Uh,
like that better though.
right. And, they have it in this sort of upper room called the Salone. I walk into the Salone, and like even that is on the tail end. There's like three people in there, and one of them is the
Hmm.
chaplain. I go up and introduce myself to him. I had met him once or twice before, but in circumstances he wouldn't remember. And so I said, "Oh yes, I'm Jen's friend, and I was the one that was interested in that flat. I think she mentioned it to you." And he said, "Yeah, yeah, that's too bad, but come back in 3 years when it'll be like a luxury flat and it'll cost 3 or 4 thousand euros a month to rent, and come back and rent it then." And I'm like, "Okay, sure, I will." But I want to talk to you about something else. And he sort of looked at me. I said, I want to talk to you about maybe making a donation to the church, a gift to the church. And his eyes sort of lit up and come right this way. And we go into his office. And I told him, I'd been looking at that niche on the facade of this church for 9 years. And I have been daydreaming, fantasizing about being the one to make a marble statue of St. Mark for that niche. And he sort of jumped a little bit and said, "Jason, I've been chaplain here for 5 years. And since I've arrived, I've been telling people we need to find a sculptor to make a marble statue of St. Mark for the church." And he says, "Do you do altars as well? Because we need a new altar for the lady chapel." And I was like, "Oh yeah, sure. I do altars." I, had never done anything like that. But I walked out of that meeting with two commissions, the altar and the statue of St. Mark's. And all I did was go in and ask for it.
Hmm.
And yeah, I donated it. He paid me a stipend to basically keep me alive, and sort of get my bills paid as I made this statue over the course of, from start to finish, a year and a half. But the marble carving itself took 8 months. You might not know this about marble carving, but when you make a marble statue, whether it's a portrait or a figure, you do it in clay first, right? Because you can make mistakes in clay and fix those mistakes, right? So you can
Right.
edit. And so when you get the clay model looking exactly like what you want the marble to look like, then you make a plaster cast of the clay, and that sort of preserves it. And then you simply copy the clay model into the marble using a technique known as pointing. It's a very old technique. I mean, the ancient Greeks, pointed their marbles. So that's the big secret that nobody knows about marble carving. You don't just get a rock and start going for it. You do a rough draft first, and then when it's perfect, you slavishly, well, more or less, copy it. And so, yeah, so several months making the clay model, and then 8 months carving it. At the same time, I constructed and sort of oversaw the construction of some parts of this altar for the chapel. And I am proud to say that to this day, this was back in 2008. I was then and continue to be the only American sculptor in history to have a permanent public marble monument on the cityscape of Florence. So there's Donatello,
Wow.
yeah, and Michelangelo and a lot of other people, and me. So a little bit of a claim to fame there. Not really, but it's a nice calling card.
Well, I really think it's neat how you asked, because one thing that I've had people even say of my podcast, because over the 2.5 years I've done this, I've reached out to so many different types of people, and some I've had to wait 2 years, like they just weren't ready. They didn't have the time, whatever it was. And I'd have people who would say, how are you doing this? Why would you want to do this? And how is this working? And I do say, obviously I am a Christian, so I do believe that God is part of it. But I also was saying, like, there's such a, you never know what's going to happen if you ask. Now, someone could say no, but that's the same as if you didn't ask at all. So
Yeah,
it's always kind of like, just try,
absolutely.
and you never know what's going to happen. And so it always encourages me when I can meet other people who've done that, when they're like, hey, this is something I want to do. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'm not going to just wait to see if something will just pop my way. I'm going to try and see if I
Yeah,
can open the door. And
yeah,
if the door opens, I'll just walk right through it. And so I think that's so cool that you actually went to the church to ask. I mean, it's probably a little scary too, since I mean, I know you said you'd been a teacher for a bit, but at the same time, it wasn't like you were very well known or like had this
no,
illustrious
not at all.
career
No,
to like
no,
go, hey, you want my name on your church.
no. I didn't really sell myself. I certainly wasn't in the physical state that morning to do, too much sort of, tooting my own horn. I just went in and simply asked, and maybe that was the secret. I didn't come in and say, oh, I've done this and that and the other thing, because I really didn't have much to brag about. But Florence, it's actually quite a small town, and sort of everyone knows everyone else to a certain extent, especially in the foreign community, the English language speaking foreign community, and we help each other out, and so if I was a passing visitor to Florence, that might have been something else. But I lived in Florence, and we had mutual friends, and we actually became quite good friends. He
Hmm.
and I, Father Lawrence, yeah, and I actually became part of the church. I started attending regularly, and I even was um, practically forced to join the church council, and so I helped run the church for the better part of a decade. So
But when did you become an atheist then?
I've always been an atheist. However, I uh, I was born into a Catholic family. I went to Catholic school, elementary school. I stopped going to church pretty much as soon as I stopped going to Catholic school. Um, Moving to Italy and studying art history, you can't study the history of Italian art without studying the history of the art of the Catholic Church. I mean, that's
Sure. Yeah.
that is the history of art to a great extent. And then I got a master's degree in sacred art from the Vatican, from a Vatican-controlled school. I did this mostly to it helped fulfill a loophole in my immigration. If I wanted to be a self-employed artist in Italy at this time, I needed to have graduated with a higher degree from an Italian school, and
Hmm.
this came along as a nice opportunity. It was convenient. It was inexpensive. And it sounds great to say, yeah, I got a master's degree in sacred art from the Vatican. And
It
it's a
sounds
really
very,
interesting
yeah.
degree. Basically, it basically trains an artist to be a liturgical design consultant, which is kind of like
Hmm.
an interior decorator for churches, because everything inside a church, if you're a Christian, you probably know this, is very, very certainly in the Catholic Church. Um,
It's ornate. Yeah.
it's not just ornate. Everything is it's not typically it's not. I should say much of its ornamentation is very, very specific. And this is the difference between a religious art and sacred art. So religious art is just art with a religious theme. Like my statue of St. Mark is, it's a biblical figure. It's, Michelangelo's David, biblical figure. Sacred art is a tool that is used in the um, uh, celebration or performance of the liturgy. So we're talking about the vestments that priests wear or nuns wear. We're talking about the church, the fabric of the church itself, um, altars, tabernacles, baptismal fonts. Everything has a very, very um, structured approach to its design that's based in tradition, but also symbolism. For instance, you'll almost always find baptismal fonts being octagonal, eight-sided, which refers to the 7 days of creation plus the eighth day of perfection when you are baptized, that sort of thing. 7 candles on the main altar. On the main altar, that's where you should put the tabernacle, which is the
I
little sort of
see.
safety deposit box for the blood and body of Christ after you know after it's been consecrated. You need to put that in a special place for veneration, and that has to be certain colors and certain materials. And so that's what
So the
that whole
sacred
thing.
art
Yeah.
has there's a formulaic to it. You can't change it.
No, you can absolutely. It's like a language, right? And we evolve
Okay.
language. It's not that someone came up with the rule book 1,000 years ago and it hasn't changed since then. It's constantly added, and there are variations on themes you can do, and so you can get really creative, but within a certain form. You certainly can go astray and do things that are um, non oh, what's the word? Not non-liturgical, but sort of not right, not right. Things like, I mean, it could be anything from um, an angel that is too feminine or too masculine. Angels should be fairly androgynous. It can be, an error could be making a tabernacle out of glass, because glass has a delicate feeling to it, and a tabernacle should feel strong, like a safe or a temple. You know,
But
um,
then why wouldn't your sculpture be all, because your sculpture though is it because it doesn't serve a particular purpose within the church outside of a decorative element?
Yes, I mean, it's kind of a fuzzy line. What is simply a religious statue? So it's certainly, if you took that statue, yeah, you could, as part of the fabric of the church, you could call that a piece of sacred art. If you then take it off the church and put it in a museum, then it's religious art. Because it's no
I
longer
see.
serving the function.
Okay.
You
I
know,
see. Okay.
um, so
I didn't
yeah.
even know that was a distinction. I'm not even sure I've ever heard that. I think we just always consider everything just religious art.
Well, I
I've never
mean,
thought of it that way.
sacred art is a subset of religious art.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I didn't know the distinction there. That's really interesting.
yeah. Sacred art
Um,
has a function. Yeah.
but so okay, so you said that you've always been atheist, so you stopped
Yeah.
going to church
Hmm.
when you left
About
Catholic
14.
school.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I ask what it was that you decided? Because I've interviewed several people who were atheists, and they all
Mhm.
had different reasons. But what was it at 14 that you were like, I don't believe in this. I don't
It
believe.
wasn't at 14. It was, um, I mean, from, I don't want to say day one, because I don't remember, but I don't remember a time I ever believed in God. And
Hmm.
even though I was going to church every Sunday and every Friday when I was going to, the church at school,
Yeah.
um, I, uh, I think I have a, a mind that doesn't allow for um, irrational and I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I mean, you know,
Oh no, you're fine.
it's. I mean, one of the definitions of faith is belief in something for which there is insufficient evidence. And I just can't get over that hump. I never have been able to get over that hump. I would ask questions, and as soon as, and I think I was the kind of kid that asked a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
And when I, lived my young years, seeing people tell me to believe in certain things and do certain things because bad things will happen and this is good and this is bad, and then seeing other people who absolutely go against that sort of thing. I have to say, I don't think I went to a very healthy parish when I was a kid. The teachers at my elementary school, I'd say probably a third or a half of them were nuns, and they were, by and large, bitter, and
Oh
a
dear.
few
Like
even
bitter against what?
just in their personalities, bitter, hateful.
Oh.
And so nuns and clergy generally were these fearful authority figures that weren't
Yeah.
promoting any sort of advantage to being around them.
But it's also, well, I would think it would be very hypocritical for you. You'd be like, why would I want to be like you?
Well, yeah, certainly, and it wasn't 100%. There's some nice people too, but I certainly didn't see religion as being something that made a person better or easier to be around. We're all human. And I don't. I never was. I hate religion, sort of thing. Religion has fulfills amazing purposes, but you know what? Here's something I don't really ever talk about. I really think there's something. It might even be something a little bit on the spectrum with me that I have never, and I didn't even know it really existed until I was maybe in my 30s. I've
Hmm.
never experienced existential dread. I've never feared death, and not that I don't think it's going to happen to me, but I've never felt the desperation that I think most people feel at from time to time, to know that there's something more, or that there is a purpose or design, or that things
Yeah.
aren't as chaotic as they seem to be. I've never had that. I don't welcome death. I've got a lot of things I want to do. There's never going to be a time where I'm like, okay, that's done. I've done everything I want to do.
Yeah.
But it's inescapable. The fact that I don't remember my life before birth, I think that's what's going to be after death. I'm not going to remember. I'm just going to, I winked into existence. I winked out. And for me, that makes this life incredibly precious. And I'm going to do everything I really want to do in this world, in this life. Hopefully leave it a better place. That really drives my vocation as an educator as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I I actually don't understand how some religious people have much motivation at all in this world if they really truly believe that there's a much better life afterwards that's going to last for so long, eternally, that this is just a blink of an eye.
Mm-hmm.
I remember even, probably even before first grade, being told, oh, heaven is this and it's amazing. And, if you want a banana, you snap your fingers, you got a banana, you eat the banana, it's great, you can have another. And, you fly around and everyone you've ever known is going to be there, and all your dead pets. And I'm like, great, why don't we just let's just go ahead and, let's go now, No. Don't think that. That's bad. That's bad to think that. Okay. So do you see the problem? You tell me that, things are so amazingly better on the other side, and yet we should fear it. We should dread it. And if you don't do certain things, we can get into the whole you know, I mean, we don't have to go down theological rabbit holes. I'm sure you know there's a lot of reasons, um, reasonable reasons, suppositions that make it difficult for a lot of people to have faith. I don't know if
Well,
I actually know anyone who really does have true and perfect faith. Actually, you know, when you think
no,
about what,
that's interesting. I
well,
was going to say, sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah. So, you know, when you think about what the Catholics believe, transubstantiation, that you're consuming the flesh and blood of the Son of God.
Yeah.
I've never, you know, people are, you know, they go to church and they're very respectful about it, you know, and they've got a sense of decorum. But if I truly believed that I was about to consume the flesh and blood, no matter how it tasted or felt, that it was real flesh and blood of the Son of God, who for some reason had to kill himself to free me from sin, but we don't have to go down that rabbit hole. Um, I would come crawling on my hands and knees, trembling, crying, weeping with emotion if I really believed that. I've never seen anyone, you know, and they take it and genuflect, say their prayer, and go out to lunch afterwards, and they do it every week. I just can't believe uh, people can be so blasé and truly believe what they purport to believe, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
No, it does make sense to me. And I think it's interesting how, when you mention faith, I think everyone has faith. They have faith in something.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
not it doesn't necessarily have to be religious of any sense of the word, but more of just faith in themselves, faith in life, faith in the cycle of time.
Hmm.
Um, and I definitely, it is very interesting to me because, my mom grew up she went to a Catholic school, and she told me some of her, really worst memories of school were at Catholic school. No, and this is not to beat down any Catholic school. It's simply to say that she also experienced just people being really nasty. And she was like, I don't get it. Like, if I'm supposed to, like, you know, if good and bad is so important, and my actions are so important, why is it that authority figures can just do whatever they want to do, and that doesn't seem to count? Um,
I
and
think living a
then,
life of faith is very hard for most people. You know,
like, a life of faith in what sense?
if you, or I should say, maybe a religious faith,
Yeah. If you were
living your
actually,
religion because of the
if you really
strictures
believe
placed.
it,
Say that
you're
again.
saying. If you
No,
really believe it.
if you believe it or not, if you're practicing the religion, you
Mm-hmm.
are placing strictures upon your behavior. You
Mm.
are assuming opinions that might not actually be your own about how the world works. But to be
Mm-hmm.
faithful to that religion, you do it anyway. And that can, that can rub people wrong. You can believe in, 90% of everything your religion, professes that you need to believe, your credo, but that 10% that you don't believe,
Mm-hmm.
uh, how do you deal with that? Do you see it as a failure within yourself? Or do you suspect that maybe your religion has got it wrong? And then how do you deal with that? Especially if it's a religion that you're born into and your entire family and social structure, your world is built around that faith.
Yeah.
I think living a life of faith is tremendously difficult. I certainly couldn't do it.
No, I agree with you. It is tremendously difficult. And, I'm just going to speak from my experience here because I know
Yeah.
we disagree on this. But I think there are many things about my walk with the Lord that I did not understand. I grew up in a home where it was different. It was different than your experience in the sense, or maybe it was the same. I don't know. But, like, my family professed Christianity. We went to church. My dad was very looked up to. People thought he was a really amazing person. He would leave the door open when he would pray so that every time we would pass by, we'd see him praying. He would have the Bible open so that we would see him reading the Bible. He would blast the sermons in the house so that, wherever you were in the house, you could hear that preacher, that really
It was like
famous
on
preacher.
television or,
It was it was more radio.
huh,
This
interesting.
back when people listen.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
we
he
still
didn't,
listen to radio,
but
but you
he
know what I
also,
mean.
so he went to church, but then also listened to other services. Is that
Mm-hmm.
okay? Okay.
Yeah. And I remember as a kid just thinking, wow, my dad really loves God. But then the way he would treat my mom, the way he would treat my sister and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I was like, no, this can't be right because you're a father is supposed to be loving and nurturing, supposed to be protective. Whenever you think of a father figure in the ideal sense, it's supposed to be a shepherd for his family, takes care of the flock, takes care of his kids, makes sure they love, and he would do anything for his kids, you know? And I just saw such the opposite in my dad, and I had so many nights where I would just cry, and I'd be like, God, I don't get it. You have given me this father, and in your word it says to honor your father and your mother, and my father is not in the least bit honorable by anything this person does. And what was so interesting is as I got older too, my dad would say things like, the Bible talks about how women can't preach. And I would be like, why can't women preach? What if they're really gifted in preaching? Why can't they? And he would say, well, the Bible says you can't. And I would go,
Does it?
okay. And then I
Does
would
it?
talk to but what I would do is the interesting thing is as time went on, at first I would just kind of gulp and go, okay,
Yeah.
whatever. I'm too afraid. I'll just accept whatever you say. But as time went on, I started asking God instead of man, Lord, what is your word actually telling me? What is it, when I have this guy over here or this woman over here who says this about you, and this is how they treat me, and therefore I'm supposed to correlate both of them. What are you actually like? And so I would always find that asking God instead of somebody what the right answer was and looking to what his word said instead of what someone said his word said was always more fruitful. And because you're right, in a walk of faith, it's true. It is very hard, and there are things where you wrestle. And there have been things I have wrestled with the Lord with for years to go, Lord, this is really hard for me. I don't understand this. Please help me. Or help me to see this rightly because I don't see it rightly. Or show me why this is right. And I think it's just been, it's interesting how you said like all these, and I've seen that where there's all of these people or authority figures that tell you what God is like. But
Yeah.
it's like if I'm actually going to know God and his love for me, similar to how you were bringing up, what Catholics believe when it comes to communion. If I really truly believed this, why am I not more cognizant of like how holy this is? Like what I'm partaking in. And so it's true, and I found that the only way to know God is to ask him and go directly to him as opposed to other people because other people just always have failed. I
Mm.
can't tell you one person, including myself, that has not failed me, who's a
Is-
religious person.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
you
Well,
would
that's
term
it's
religious.
well, that's a universal, experience. I think no one's perfect. No one's perfect.
Yes, but when
Um,
they claim to be, right?
yeah.
Or when
Well,
they claim to be following scripture, it's even more
right.
painful.
Well, the
Because
the
you're like,
big
you
the
might
big
as well just be
overarching
bad and I'll get it. Don't even tell me anything else?
the overarching problem with all religions is that they're filled with people,
Yeah.
and you just can't get away from that. Um, and religions are safe havens for certain types. People who crave authority on either end, either want to be told what to do, feel they need to be told what to do in order to live a good life for some reason. Maybe someone doesn't have a moral compass strong enough to, point them in the direction of what is good and what is bad. And so they need a rule book. And then there are other
Mm-hmm.
people who want to be sure of their understanding of the rules. And one way to do that is to gain authority within that religious structure, become a church leader who then tells other people what to do. And when those people follow him, that validates them. And I'm not saying that's what religious people are like, but religions attract those sorts of people just as surely as, you know, not to, not to go back to the Catholics, but there's a reason that pedophilia is a problem among celibate communities. Um,
I know, it's sad.
it's a safe haven. When you become when you declare that you're going to live a life of celibacy, that is a veil for a lot of, or for some people. There's some
Yeah,
people
but
who,
not only declare, but say to be close to God, you must.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's, first of all, I mean, if you read the Bible, it doesn't say that. But if
right,
you say to somebody, to be close to God, therefore you must, I definitely agree with you that the Catholic Church is a haven for people who have really bad intentions, right? But also at the same time, if you have all these desires as a human, which are just natural to being alive, and you're told to act upon these is against God, so don't
yeah,
even, crush them. Whatever you have to do, then you're going to get to this point where what do you do? You know what I mean? And it's not to excuse anything, but it's to say that it's not surprising.
yeah. Well, someone much smarter than me once compared that situation to how people deal with um, food.
Hmm.
When you approach sex, sexuality as a natural and universal aspect of being human, approach it
Mm-hmm.
in a healthy
Yeah.
way, you're going to be
Mm.
okay. But if you restrict it, it's and you're going to obsess over it. Just like
Yeah.
people who are obsessed with food, they're either obese or they're anorexic. It's one
Mm.
way or the
Yeah.
other. So when you deny a a certain aspect of being alive, of being a human being, um,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's gonna lead to trouble. It's gonna lead to trouble. Not always, not everywhere, and it's not endemic to a group. It's endemic to humanity.
Yeah.
This is what happens. So
Well, can I ask? I know you mentioned unhealthy parish. Is that something you ever had to face as a boy, as a young boy?
no, no, thank goodness, no. No,
Okay.
that was not a part of my experience or the experience of anyone I grew up with. It wasn't unhealthy in that way. It was just a very parochial, um, no pun intended, uh, um, insular, um, small-minded, small town, um, with the people at the top, with the usual issues of being authoritarians. And I'm not sure. It was a religious school. Um, and I think I remember at one point hearing that because it was a religious school, that the nuns actually didn't even like have to have like teaching degrees or something like that. And it was not,
Oh.
I didn't learn a lot. I didn't feel like I learned much. Or certainly I didn't feel like I could learn at the rate or speed or progress. I felt like I was being held back. There was just nowhere to go. And the
Well,
school,
you definitely learned about the fallenness of man, it seems like. You got a really good
we all learned that.
upfront
We all learned that.
lesson.
Yeah.
I was going to say, too, that, maybe you should go back. I don't know if that school's still around, but you could offer to make a commission of like an angel of judgment for your own.
Nah, they couldn't afford it. they,
I would like to donate as a commission based on my experience. This is how I felt.
I'm over it. I'm over it. It's and that it was a long time ago, and I mean I don't want to give the impression that I had some profound trauma or that I'm still dealing with it or whatever. No, this is just um, you know I for whatever reason grew up with a inability um, to to believe, an inability for real religious faith. But
Yeah.
but I'm
But what strikes me, what's so hard for me when I think about you, though, is that you are
mm,
such a creator of beauty. And I
yeah.
just always, it's like how it's,
You
yeah,
see
I
beauty
mean,
through a religious lens. That's why. So it's hard for you to decouple those ideas, perhaps.
well, what I would say though is when I think about how you can create such beauty, and then I think, where did he get the ability to do that? Like, that he just was born and popped out and like that all came. And like, I know you learned and you worked
Yeah,
hard. So
for years
not
and
at
decades,
all,
and it's
it's
ongoing.
not at
Yeah.
all a discount, but I couldn't do that.
Yes, you could. Yes, you could. Yes,
No.
you could. No, no, no.
I'm telling you, I promise you, my patience is not like that at all. I have no patience for sculpting. And that work, I'm sorry, Jason, I would fail. And the model that I would create wouldn't be one. You would look at it and think it's a rock. I would not.
No, 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 no. Uh, the creation of art is a skill. You can be good at it and you can be terrible at it, but it is a skill that can be learned. This was the big epiphany that I had in 1996 when I first walked into Charles Cecil's studio. It's not something you are born with. Every great artist was trained. There's no one who just, you know, you don't
But you
just wake up
had the
one morning.
seed to be trained.
No, actually, that's really funny. Did you say that you have to see to be trained?
No, no, no. You had the seed to be
Oh, the
trained.
seed with a D?
Yeah.
Seed? Ah, okay.
Seed.
Well, I mean, yeah, I went to school. You know,
It's not like everyone on your street is a sculptor.
everyone on my street is a sculptor.
No,
What?
not everyone is.
Oh, well, not everyone
You
tries.
are.
But not everyone tries to be. I know a lot of sculptors in Florence. There's tons of us, and even more painters. Yeah, and no, it's something you can learn, and it might not be the thing that you're best at in the world, but I mean, this is what I do for a living. I take absolute beginners and I teach them how to sculpt, and I do a pretty
Well,
good
I
job.
will tell you what, if I ever come to Florence, which I really
Yes,
hope to, I will
yeah,
email you, and then my husband and I will come and we will pay you to give us a lesson.
sounds good.
And
Sounds
if
good.
it looks terrible, we can shake hands on it and agree I'm just not an artist.
Well, if you take a lesson, it probably won't be anything great. I mean, listen, when I was in school, I worked from live models 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. And after about 2 years of that, I was like, okay, I think I'm getting the hang of it. I mean, it's people think, oh, art, it's, something you're born with. And no, I mean, that'd be like, oh, heart surgery. You just got to be born a heart surgeon. No, you study and train for years. And I'm not saying that art is on the same level of importance or relevance to society as a heart surgeon, but it doesn't
Yes,
mean
it
it
is.
takes, well, we could debate, but it's still a tremendous amount of work, still a
Yeah.
tremendous amount of work. So, and I'm not trying to like, oh, no, really, I'm not great. No, it's Michelangelo said that if people knew how hard he worked, they wouldn't call him a genius.
You're right. They probably, if we knew all of his flaws. Yeah.
Well, he had a lot
How
of
many
flaws.
times he failed. Yeah, he did have a lot of
Yeah,
flaws. Yeah.
yeah. But
But
no, he worked. He worked so hard. I mean, he was absolutely
yeah.
obsessed.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And it took like his devotion to what he wanted to do. Yeah, it's crazy.
That and also he was one of the luckier sculptors ever to live. He was born in absolutely the right time and in the right place. He was, taken under the wing of Lorenzo de' Medici, one of the richest men in Europe, who had an absolute goal to train up artists, to rival ancient Greece and Rome. And he chose Michelangelo, not only Michelangelo, but he chose Michelangelo as a protege, from a very early age. So there's quite a bit of luck in there too.
Yeah. Well, Jason, I have to say, it's been so great to talk with you. I mean, I've learned so much. I knew nothing about sculpting. I mean, very little. And I've always loved seeing it, but I've never known anything about it, nor has anyone had, any sort of learning to tell me about it. So yeah. I'm really grateful for that. And I love your work is beautiful. So I'll have your website linked here so people can go and look, and his email's there if you want to ask him a question. I think I mentioned that before too. But no, if my husband and I ever come to Italy, which I hope we will someday,
you will.
I will email
Everyone
you.
in the world comes to Italy, sadly.
I know, but it's it's the finances. That's
yeah.
a real thing. Like you said, like when you started out, and when you're a young person, some dreams are very big. Not impossible, but just very big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll make it.
All right.
If you want to, you'll make it. You'll make it happen.
All right, well, keep living for a while, okay?
I plan to. I plan to.
Okay. All right, bye, Jason. Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it.